Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name is Jessica, and I am the proud member of Managed Solution, a team of IT business professionals. And I have with me our virtual CIO, Tony Pecora. Thanks for being here, Tony.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good afternoon.
So today we're going to be talking about what business leaders really need to know. They don't need to know everything. They can't know everything, but what do they really need to know? What do they need to understand for this modern workplace that we have been thrust into with everybody working from home? I know that's a topic that you love.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Okay.
pretty big now.
What's important to you about this topic?
Really, it's about the change and adapting to the modern workforce and what that looks like and how to transition into it and be best prepared for change because it's coming.
It's here, it's coming 100%. So part of the series that we're creating is to educate our community, educate our business leaders so that they have something to go back and work with. And also to, have people learn about us and our team. So a little bit that I know about you, Tony, is, like I said, you are a virtual CIO. You've been in IT for over 20 years.
Yeah, long time now, 20 years. I've been with this company in particular for 5 years, but yeah, my IT interest started when I was pretty young, I guess you could say.
Yeah, you said that your dad was in IT and that's how you got your start.
He was, and he was always in IT consulting, that particular space, which is what we did. And I
Mhm.
kind of followed along in that, had that interest in computers, and then later on developed the interest in consulting.
Nice. Okay. And you had mentioned to me, so we've been getting to know each other since I started, at the company. And you had mentioned to me that you actually, at 12 years old, you created your first virus and you infected
Ah,
an
yes.
entire classroom of people. And I always find that the people who are most passionate about what they're doing have stories like that, where when they were very young, they were, if they're entrepreneurs, they were selling, Kit Kats to the kids. And in your case, you were infecting schools with computer
Yeah,
viruses.
I guess the tech interest did run young, and that one was fun. The teacher immediately knew it was me because I guess to be a little humble, I was a little too overqualified for the typing skills class that I was in. So I started messing with the prompt and infecting other computers via old floppy diskettes, which might give away my age.
Oh my God. I actually remember those floppy disks. I
Yeah.
can't remember they do. I remember them. That's awesome. So yeah, 5 years ago, you started at the company. You've worked your way up very quickly since then. You're very knowledgeable. You're very passionate about the topic of IT and business as well. And I know that one of the things that you've accomplished since being at the company is you actually saved one of our clients over 250,000 a year in IT
Mhm.
spend.
Yeah, telecom and IT combined, yeah, it was just about $250,000, and that was their annual cost, but it was actually recurring monthly cost that we trimmed. So that's what it came out to per year, but it would have extended more.
And that's massive, massive.
Mhm.
And I bring that up because I want, give people context of the breadth and depth of your knowledge and what you're able to create for others and for organizations.
Yeah, of course. Mhm.
Yeah. And some of your favorite hobbies. So I know you're into softball, tennis.
Oh yeah, yeah, pretty active in sports. I joined a team that one of our coworkers had been on for a while too. I've always been into that. I mean, computers has kind of been like a hobby and a passion here and there, but shooting, I'd love to go shooting, of course. It's a little bit hard now with the coronavirus, so you can, I guess, do it on your computer, but it's not as effective. But yeah, I've always been pretty active.
Okay. Yeah. No, you're a very active guy. Sometimes when we're on calls, I see you in your gym shirt.
Oh yes, always ready. I do
Good.
have the home gym going in the garage now, which has been a great benefit to have.
Yeah, same. I'm actually waiting for some barbells of my own. So
Oh, excellent.
hear you. Yeah. Yeah. So got to stay healthy while we're all dealing with this, right? While we're all working from home, it's really important and unable to go to the gym. So, Tony, I want to talk to you about, we're working from home today, right? So
Mhm.
we've all been kind of thrust into this situation where leaders are now trying to pivot and understand how do I lead and how do I create culture and how do I ensure productivity and move the business forward while the market is what it is at the moment, and all my employees are working from home. And so you and I started talking about the modern workplace. Will you just explain to me a little bit, like, what does a modern workplace mean to you?
Yeah, sure. So modern workplace is always growing, evolving, and changing. But what it really is at its core is using the digital information aids that we are, the digital technology and direction we're in, to
Mhm.
adapt that to your workplace, to modernize that, because that digital transformation is where everything is going to. It's less about the brick and mortar and about how can we achieve our company goals from wherever we are at any point in time, that during the week, that you can do that, and to get your tasks done however it needs to be done, that it doesn't always require you to be in the office. You don't have to have in-person meetings all the time, and
Mhm.
you don't have to wait for good internet connection before you can work on your job. You have the ability to do stuff anywhere. So adapting that digital transformation is the most important part to modern workplace.
And as somebody who has been in IT and been actually professionally in IT, not just dabbling in it when you were younger, but you've been professionally in it for 20 years.
Mhm.
And I know that you know, you've managed a lot of people. You've been a manager at a lot of companies. Right now, you're not only our VCIO, but you also do manage a team. So I'm curious to know, what's the effect that you see on this modern workplace, this working from home capacity that companies are now providing for their employees, regardless of COVID and health and all that stuff. But what do you see are the benefits, and maybe even some of the drawbacks, if you see any, for the actual employees and the team themselves?
Okay, sure. So, a benefit that I've seen for myself and with a lot of team members is if you are doing a remote workforce, which most of us are now, but really only about 7 to 9% of people were doing before this pandemic really kicked into gear and forced everyone to quarantine, was when you are working remote, and let's say you have a call at 8 in the morning, and if it's just a voice call, you can get up for it at 7:45, practice, wake up your vocal cords, do whatever you need to do. You don't have to get up at 6:45 to get ready, drive in, prep, have your coffee at your desk, and be ready for a call. So you're inherently saving an hour of what really is kind of that overhead of the normal day you have.
Mm-hmm.
For my department in particular, who is the senior technical leadership team, and for the people who are in the field, they save time driving to clients. And typically it's 15 minutes to a half hour per client, two a day. And the senior technical team, that's that much more time they can spend assisting on escalations and not have to worry about getting to the office, getting their setup. And instead, they work remotely, they turn everything on, it's ready to go as my machine is. Having a direct always on VPN into our office, I can get into company files immediately. I can jump on meetings immediately as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that there's not only an efficiency, there's a monetary efficiency for organizations, there's a time efficiency for productivity for their whole team, right? And there's also this lifestyle benefit that comes for the employees and for the people who are putting all that energy every day during the week for you, for the organization, for the leader, and gives us that benefit of having that extra time, maybe for ourselves or for the things that we want to or need to do outside of work.
Yeah, and that work-life balance is so important in the modern workplace because IT in particular is not an 8 to 5 job, and it never will be.
Mm-mm.
Typically, that's just for the help desk support function when most people are staffed. But for a lot of my team, they'll work split shift. So they'll work in the mornings to cover emergencies for clients. And then if they don't have any on sites, they'll work later in the evening or what we normally consider off hours so that they can, like we need to reboot a server for maintenance. Well, perfect. They can work it after hours. They're happy to have that break during the day. But that flexibility of work-life balance is really important in this time so that you don't get lost in either working full time or kind of being a little bit confused or feeling like you lack direction. What do I do if I'm not going to clients? I lose that sense of purpose. What's my job? And that's where you ask your supervisor, what is it that I should be doing? How do we find and create that value? And most importantly, how do I set my clients up for success and really get ingrained with what they need?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So bringing this into the conversation of how the technology actually supports all of this and happening, the communication with the team and their supervisor and actual productivity, serving clients, all of that. So there's this invisible infrastructure, right, that we call technology.
Mhm.
Invisible, unless it's, some of the physical part, but there's a lot of invisibility to it. And a lot of leadership, they rely on the people that they've hired and others to really know what they're talking about and make the best decisions for their team. But would you agree with me that, on some level, especially now that we're leaning so heavily on technology to function and keep up with our, keep up with the game, really, uh, both personally and professionally, it's important for leaders to start really understanding at least some of the infrastructure that is supporting their business in this way, so that they could be dangerous enough to kind of know like what's possible, what's like, pie in the sky, if I could have anything, I would have technology do this, but not always. Technology can't always do what they, people want it to do when they don't fully understand it. So would you agree that it's an important thing to start really understanding some basics?
Yeah, really, you hit something on the nail on the head there with asking the question as a leader in your business: what is possible with what I have? What can my infrastructure do? Because you can have an appliance that can support 500 remote users, but
Mm-hmm.
if your internet connection will realistically only support about 5 remote users, you're not using that technology to its ability. And generally speaking, that technology is expensive to not use, and to actually get that internet line up to snuff so where it can cover those 400 or 500 employees.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very small investment as opposed to a capex expenditure where you need to buy all this hardware to get people remotely, or now you suddenly have to move to a cloud because you never thought about what happens if this company has to work remote, and now you're stuck with a connection that's poor that was never evaluated because it worked fine, or you have an aged hardware because you didn't want to do the capex expenditure. It's now forced us to think about this. So a lot of people are getting stuck with, I wasn't ready for a modern workplace. As I mentioned before, only about 7 to 9% were really working remotely full time before this started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so people weren't really ready. So you just mentioned a few things, right? You touched on some hardware, you touched on internet connection, you touched on CapEx, so you touched on the finances of
Mhm.
understanding technology. So let's take a little bit, like one layer down for a second. What are the basic pieces, the basic components that a leader should consider when trying to make any sort of technical transformation within their company, trying to apply technology to their culture, to how their business functions, to expenses, things like that. So, we have physical devices, we have, data storage and backup, we have, file sharing organization, instant messaging, which is something
Mhm.
that, we need, and us in our company, like we use it all the time. That's our virtual water cooler, things like that. So can you share with us what are those like major components that people who don't have the time to really become experts in this but need to know a little bit should take into consideration?
Yeah, sure thing. So you could cut it into a couple of categories. The most important one you have is your backbone. So that's the structure in which you can connect to the internet, and for which all things really are possible, with the exception of maybe voice dialing on your phone. But if you don't have that stable internet connection, or you don't have internet enabled devices, or you don't have the option to connect over internet, you really limit what you can do as a business. So making sure you have that, your primary internet service line, and sometimes a backup as well, making sure that's a solid and stable line that can handle capacity, but also that it's been tested. Does it have low jitter? Does it have peak periods? Is there times where it simply can't handle phone and data traffic at the same time? So that backbone is probably most important. Then you have your core infrastructure. And then generally speaking, that's stuff that you have on premise.
Can I actually pause you for a quick second? Because you just
Yeah,
talked about internet connection, and that's something that's so basic to so many people. Oh, we just think like, plug in a router, plug in whatever it is, the two machines, like for me, plug in the two machines that provide internet, and that's
yeah.
it. And we think that that's it. But actually, your office location matters. What your service actually offers in your location matters. There's so many things, and I've learned a little bit since being here that matter. So I just wanted to point that out from what you said. Is you touched on a little bit, but I just wanted to highlight it, that it's really not just about plugging in an internet connection, and it's going to be the same for people at home, right?
Yeah, the first thing we do whenever we do an office move for clients, which has become common now as they're looking to reduce or expand space,
Mm-hmm.
is we ask what your address is. And it's not for mailing purposes, it's because we want to see what service is available, and in particular, what is the type of service. It is a now much more common fiber service, which can handle throttle speeds. It can scale to almost any speed that you would need for a business. And also, what's the distance that you are from what's called a central office, sometimes a bank where the lines are terminated by the cable company. Because if it's many, many miles away, you generally will get a poor signal. So what we help do is talk with internet brokers to see what's available in that area, and then what is our experience with that carrier. What do we have a lot of trouble tickets? Do we have a hard time getting in contact with an ISP? Or do we find that the service isn't stable around 4 o'clock when peak periods are coming from people going home and starting to get online?
Got it. Thanks. What was the second thing that you mentioned?
Oh, sure. So talking about our core infrastructure. So that's what protects you from the outside world, from the internet. So it's going to be your firewall and router. Sometimes they're a combination of the two. And your internet switches, which are what's going to connect everything in your office or location or even your house to your firewall, which then gets you out to the internet. A lot of that infrastructure is similar, but it is scalable depending on the size of your company. But that firewall or that router can tell you, I'm licensed for this many remote connections, or I can handle this much capacity, or I can encrypt traffic and send this much at the same time. That lets you know how many people could you work at home simultaneously with that device without any other infrastructure behind it if they wanted to remote into your office, for instance. The same thing applies to your house. What can your home internet do? What can your home router do? And are you, always working on Wi-Fi, or are you wired in at home? As in the case of my house, I do wire it.
Okay. I think it's funny because the way you explain it, like at this point, someone who's like a lay person with technology, their eyes might start crossing right now.
Sometimes, yeah.
But this is where the expertise really comes in. But I think, Tony, what you're sharing is, if you can step back for a quick second. Just generally, can you explain you explained what a switch does? A switch connects all the parts basically in your physical infrastructure, right?
Yeah, essentially. It's what connects everything in-house and talks to each other. It's what gives direction on who is connected where.
Okay. And
the physical link.
A high level of firewall.
Okay, that's what protects you from the outside world. It scans and screens traffic that's coming in, and it's usually responsible for encryption and connecting to different locations, to offices or your home in the office, or simply just protecting you from what's on the outside the internet. So people trying to hack in.
Right. And that could be centralized within the company, right? We don't need to have that at home.
Yeah, and at home you usually have a firewall that's built in with your service provider. They usually give you one that connects, and usually now it does your Wi-Fi for you as well. So it's like a nice all-in-one unit. Okay. But in enterprise environments, they're dedicated because they have a lot more users, a lot more work to do.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for that. So is there anything else that is a core component to this modern workplace that we're talking about?
Yeah, the infrastructure that you have that isn't the core infrastructure of all the networking and switches and cabling and all that, but it's your servers. And what else do the servers talk to? Your printers that are there, your PCs. What in the inside of your company do people need to connect to from the outside world, if anything at all? And how do they connect to it? Do they go through the firewall to access that? Is it directly exposed to the internet? Is it a combination of the two? Like you can only do it from certain locations.
Got it. Okay. Is that it? Does that make up the core components of it?
Yeah, because from there you can decide for our modern workplace, what do we need to connect to? How should we get connected to it? And what's the amount of this? And is this scalable? So once we understand those basics of what you have, then we can write a plan for you on here's how to best connect and what's going to give you the best user experience.
Right. So you're talking about the structure layer, right? And then I think the thing that most of us are really familiar with is the application layer, because that's what users, right? That's what we use all the time, right? But applications are generally scalable. So once you have the core components that you were just talking about, and you have those scaled correctly for the size of your company, then applications are pretty much you can pick one and just go.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to licensing. Sometimes they separate licensing for users that are connected directly to it, as opposed to users who have to remote into a server and use it.
Hmm.
But yeah, applications generally are only limited by that licensing model. And in the case of, like huge MRP systems, sometimes there's a performance cost that comes with it where, you have to have extra servers to perform all this additional work, but we help you evaluate that. And that isn't as common anymore. The physical part, you're correct. We have to scale and move and adjust accordingly. But the application, usually it's just licensing.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Mhm.
And so we just talked also, you started touching on the different size of the company and scalable to the size. So it sounds like if you're a 25-person company, you may have different needs than a 50-person company, the 100 or 1,000-person company. Where are those lines?
Yeah, sure.
Different?
And in the small and medium-sized business market, there's a lot of focus on 25 and 50 users as being a break point for a lot of hardware, or especially if you want a VPN over a hardware appliance, they'll give you, up to 25 licenses, up to 50 appliances. And then when we start getting into the enterprise size of 250 and above or 1,000 and above, then it requires thinking about what are they doing outside of the office that they have to come in the office for. And that's thinking about the modern workplace. Now we have all of our infrastructure in-house. Well, why? Is it for compliance reasons? Is it because you've never evaluated the cloud? So if you want to have 1,000 people dial into your office, you can, but there's a big hardware investment to do that. You have to balance that load. One device cannot handle 1,000 remote connections at once.
Hmm.
So then you evaluate, is it worth continuing to have all this stuff on premise in this warehouse or office that we have, or should we move it outside hosted so that
Mhm.
anyone at home, for instance, right now, I can connect to our what's called Paylocity, what we do for tracking hourly time and your PTO and everything. I can get to that any in the world because it's cloud-based. However, my private files and our private company contracts, I must be connected into our servers just simply for compliance reasons. So yeah, about 1,000 or so, that's when you start to get into a different mindset. But really with that modern workplace, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What are your employees trying to do regularly? Are they email all day? Do they call? Do they access files? Are they modifying CAD documents that have, a security clearance that cannot leave the building? So understanding that is the most important part.
Absolutely. And there's the option of hybrid as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hybrid is very common now, especially with email, which it's very expensive to have email sit on your mail server in-house. It's just not a good use of CapEx expenditure anymore. So moving that offsite into an Office 365, whether it's a private or government tenancy, is much cheaper in the long run. And then anyone can access it anywhere. And there's no downtime, there's no maintenance, there's no like, oh, I hope my mail server doesn't have a problem this weekend, so I don't have to go fix it. Those days are gone. So you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah. There's no praying. There's no praying that, oh, this all works. It actually can.
Yeah,
It's
too many
proactive
late
about
nights
it.
in my early technical career where exchange is done. Okay, well, let's call Jeff because Jeff is the only person in 200 employees that knows how to fix it. Instead of let's call Microsoft for support. They have 10,000 people that can help us with email being down, and they already know about it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, you just touched on a major topic as well when it comes to the modern workplace, which is internal IT.
Mhm.
I know that this is, obviously what we do, but you brought it up, and to be honest, it's a really good thing to talk about when talking about this topic, and people being at home. How I know you work with a lot of our clients and prospective clients. Are they keeping their internal IT right now, and how's that going for them?
Yeah, so they keep internal IT. Their on-site presence has been greatly diminished for safety reasons and really to adhere to public health guidelines. But there are always going to be cases where you have a new computer to work on and set up. That has to be done, on site. You can give it the kind of the white glove treatment, which now is a totally different meeting in these times. But then you deliver it to a user, have them work on it and set up, and then transition that part out. But a lot of what that on-site IT team is doing now is helping with remote support. So it doesn't really behoove you to stay in the office, because in many times you want to replicate the situation they're in so you can understand what they're doing and see what that person's workload is, and not get so tied up in, well, these are my technical things. I have to make sure all of these are working right. You need to understand what that remote employee is working with, whether it's a hotel that you can't connect to VPN over for because they restrict it, or a place that has spotty internet, or someone who's trying to connect to a Wi-Fi access point that's 3 floors away. And say, like, what? Well, our router here is working fine. I can see you connected. And they're saying, you're not listening to me. It's a bad quality connection. Oh, okay. Well, let me see what it's like. Let me try to experience it.
And we have the tools to do that remotely.
Yeah, absolutely. We can pull that up in our management information. We can tell you how good your quality of signal is. We can look at the latency. We can see how long you've been connected. We can try sending files to you as well. And we can remote into your workstation to see what's our delay, because if our delay to do this is bad, yours is going to be terrible as well.
Yeah, interesting. Very, very interesting. Do you have any other things that you want to, leave with, anything else you want to say about this topic that you want to make sure is said before we hop off?
Really, with the modern workplace, I think it's important to have a little bit more cadence than you're used to as a manager or department head, because your team is going through something that they're not used to. And internal IT is now all of a sudden, in many cases, thrown into a world where they were supporting, like I said, 7% of the company. Now it's 97% of the company. And they may be caught in a situation where they were not ready because the company wasn't ready, or these requests for this information about how do we get ourselves to a modern workplace were ignored, or the cost made it so that it was insurmountable at the time, but they have to be addressed. So have those weekly cadence meetings. I have a daily cadence meeting with my field team just to see where are they today. And if you're working remote, what are you doing, so that I can keep them engaged with clients, so the clients remember, my IT team is out here, my service team can help me if we need. And that way I have that kind of close handle on what everyone's doing, and to have everyone feel a little bit more connected in what's arguably probably one of the most disconnected times in history, let alone modern history. So make sure you're doing that and being a little bit more proactive as a manager than you normally would be. So you had mentioned, that virtual water cooler. Set a weekly call on a Friday for 20 minutes for your team, where you talk about nothing work related. This is what my tech team has been doing. I talked about projects I did on a house, and they told me what they were doing. They told me how their life was, with their kids and hanging out, and what they've been doing on the weekend, because you had those conversations in that older traditional workplace. Continue that now to help you adapt as a manager into that modern digital workforce.
I love it. I love that. And it's actually something that we implement here. And I've been finding it really fun, and it's a really nice break in the workday, and also in the work flow, because we both just called it the virtual water cooler. It's that head poke up top, up over somebody's desk. So like, hey, see how you're doing. How's your weekend? Good to see you. It's really nice. So I love that you mentioned that. Thank you so much for your time, Tony. I know it's precious, and I really appreciate it. I hope that everybody watching really appreciates it. And, if you are watching this and you found this valuable and you want to stay connected with Managed Solution, and make sure that you get all these videos and never skip a beat, just follow us on, it could be on YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever you're watching this. Follow me. You can hook up with Tony on LinkedIn. He's actually really fun. This is his professional face, but he's actually a little wild dude. And I only know that because of, the cool ways that we've been able to connect. So thank you again, Tony. And we'll see you guys again soon. We'll be creating more of these videos to educate leaders on what's going on in IT for your business and how to move forward no matter what and thrive. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.